In the small, desolate town of Black Hollow, the air was always heavy with an unexplainable chill, even in the middle of summer. The locals spoke in hushed tones of the abandoned mansion at the edge of town, a crumbling, decrepit structure known as the Hollow Manor. The stories surrounding it were whispered by the elders, always avoiding direct mention, as if speaking its name could summon something far worse. The mansion had been vacant for decades, ever since the last of the Hollow family disappeared mysteriously without a trace. But something darker lingered in the air, something the town could feel but never quite explain. Children dared each other to approach the mansion, but none ever entered. It was cursed, they said, and anyone who dared to enter would never return. One stormy evening, a group of thrill-seeking teenagers, led by the adventurous and fearless Jake, decided to test the legend. Armed with nothing but flashlights and a sense of invulnerability, they crept up to the decaying gates of Hollow Manor, the wind howling like a chorus of ghosts. "Let's see if this place is as bad as the old folks say," Jake sneered, pushing open the rusted gate with a creak that echoed through the night. They entered the mansion, their footsteps the only sound amidst the deafening silence that consumed the place. Dust filled the air, and the floor creaked with every step as if the house itself was groaning in agony. The walls were covered in faded, peeling wallpaper, and the windows were darkened with grime, blocking out the moonlight. "We should go upstairs," Jake said, his voice filled with bravado. "That's where all the creepy stuff happens, right?" Reluctantly, the group made their way up the rotting staircase, each step threatening to give way under their weight. As they reached the second floor, the air grew colder, thicker, as though something was watching them. Their flashlights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. In the distance, a low, guttural growl rumbled, sending a shiver down their spines. "What was that?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "Probably just the wind," Jake replied, though his voice lacked the conviction it once had. He tried to lead the group further, but something seemed off. The house had a pulse, a rhythmic thumping that resonated through the floorboards like a heartbeat. Suddenly, the air grew thick with the smell of rot, and the temperature plummeted. Emily screamed as something cold and wet brushed against her neck. She spun around, but there was nothing there, only darkness. As they continued down the hallway, they stumbled upon an old wooden door, its surface warped and splintered. The door creaked open on its own, revealing a room drenched in shadows. In the center of the room lay an ancient wooden chest, covered in dust and cobwebs. Jake, despite the rising dread in his chest, approached the chest. His fingers brushed against the lid, and he froze. There was something wrong with the air, something suffocating and ancient. Before he could open it, a voice, low and rasping, echoed through the room. "Leave! Now!" The voice seemed to come from every corner, a whisper that seemed to crawl beneath their skin. They turned to run, but the hallway stretched endlessly before them. Panic set in as the walls around them began to move, no longer still, but pulsing, breathing, like the house itself was alive. Jake's flashlight flickered one last time before it went out, plunging them into absolute darkness. The growling from earlier returned, louder this time, closer. Suddenly, a bone-chilling screech filled the air, and the sound of cracking bones reverberated through the mansion. Then, the walls cracked open, and a figure emerged from the shadows, a massive, contorted shape with limbs that twisted and cracked like branches in a storm. Its eyes glowed with a malignant hunger, and its jagged teeth were yellow and sharp, dripping with saliva. The thing was a grotesque fusion of human and something far worse. Its skeletal frame seemed to stretch and snap with every movement. The teenagers screamed in terror as the thing lunged toward them, its bones creaking and shattering with every grotesque step. It was hungry, starved for the souls of those who dared to enter its domain. One by one, they were dragged into the darkness, their bones snapping, their screams drowned out by the howling wind. The house devoured them, the walls closing in, and the floorboards groaning with delight as they sank into the very bowels of Hollow Manor. The next morning, the mansion was quiet once again, the only evidence of the night's horrors being the faint, echoing sound of bones shattering in the distance. Black Hollow, still cloaked in its suffocating silence, would never speak of the lost souls who had ventured into the manor and vanished. The mansion, now fully awake, waited patiently for its next victims.